Matt Makins here. Every Wednesday night on Facebook, I do a live little presentation that talks about weather war stories. And it's every Wednesday night. This week's edition is about Gettysburg and how weather impacted the outcome of that battle and the casualties and the ultimate retreat, if you will, of the Confederates under General Lee. Let's get started with a refresher. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1st to July 3rd of 1863, is considered the most important engagement of the American Civil War. After a great victory over Union forces at Chancellorsville, General Robert E. Lee, feeling a bit cocky at the moment, marched his army into Pennsylvania in late June 1863. On July 1st, Lee's Confederates clashed with the Union Army commanded by General George G. Meade. You know where? Gettysburg. On July 2nd, they had even heavier fighting, as the Confederates were fighting to the left and right, kind of surrounded a bit by the Union Army. On July 3rd, Lee came down to a decision. He ordered an attack by fewer than 15,000 troops, so they were down a great number, and he went right into the center of the Union's position. This was Cemetery Ridge. The assault, known as Pickett's Charge, managed to pierce the Union lines but eventually failed at the cost of thousands of Confederate casualties. Lee was forced to withdraw his battered army toward Virginia on July 4th, and that's where the story becomes weather involved. The Battle of Gettysburg is said to be the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War, obviously. Casualties during and casualties after, as you're about to hear. Historians put the number of casualties and missing Union and Confederate soldiers at 46,286. Death tolls mounted even in the days following the battle. So during the battle and after succumbing to injury and the weather. The weather, however, created many casualties as well. A Gettysburg man by the name of Reverend Dr. Michael Jacobs. He was a math professor at what was then called Pennsylvania College. He had a strong interest in weather and recorded his observations 3 times a day, every day, including during the battle at Gettysburg. Using that as a reference, Ben Neely, he's the executive director at the Adams County Historical Society, was quoted as saying that the most damaging aspect of the weather for this event actually occurred on July 4th, the day after the battle had ended. Rain fell across the area for most of the day. As Ben Neely noted from Reverend Dr. Jacobs' weather reports, that it put the total of rainfall at 1.39 inches. While the wounded still lay on the field, some may have felt welcomed by the break in action, but some wounded soldiers had still not moved away from low-lying areas. Low-lying areas by the Plum Run Creek, which eventually overflowed its banks. Those stranded near the floodwaters, reportedly all Confederates, died. They drowned. Another article I found. According to an AccuWeather former Vice President of Marketing and Civil War historian Dr. Lee Rainey, an even larger issue was faced as a result of the rain during the retreat attempts by Lee and the Confederates on July 4th. So they left a group behind which ultimately drowned, and then the group that was escaping had to move a 17-mile-long train of wagons filled with wounded soldiers over the dissolving dirt roads back to Virginia. A wagon train 17 miles long on dirt roads during heavy thunderstorm activity. Think of the mud. Think of the ruts. Think of the wagons losing wheels, breaking axles for 17 miles trying to trudge through the mud. Well, Dr. Lee Rainey said the rains caused the Potomac River, easily fordable, crossable, on the march to the north for the Confederates. The flow had become so high because of the thunderstorm activity that the Confederate Army was trapped on the north side with the Union forces in pursuit of them. Well, the Confederates dug in for a desperate battle, but in the end they were able to escape across the river on the 13th, the day before Meade's planned attack. So they eventually escaped, but it took several days for the Potomac to calm down enough for them to cross. Isn't that remarkable? That's this week's Weather War Stories, something you probably did not hear about in your history classes, how weather impacted outcomes of major historic events. If you have an idea of a weather war story that you'd like for me to look into and to be told, just send me a note. Find me on social media. It's easy, Facebook or Twitter @MattMakins.